why should people, for example, the people who are students at Yale now studying about how to go out into the world and exercise their profession, and faculty who are teaching the students to go out and try to establish policies in the world, why should the students and faculty and other people in the community be concerned about this kind of perennial issue of the UFO phenomenon that people have been hearing about for a long time, actually for your entire life? You know, what's happening that is causing anybody to suggest that the UFO issue should be kind of front and center as one of the most important issues to be talking about here. So that's the question that we're faced with here today. You know, that we don't have to dwell on what some of the problems are that we're looking at right now. But as I said, that in the country, with Charlie Kirk being shot down right in front of everyone, and people like Steve Bannon coming on television calling for an open war now, that somehow it was all of the left radicals, which includes the entire Democratic Party, from his perspective, you know, are responsible for this, and that the time has come to mount a war against them all. He's called upon President Trump to issue an executive order declaring the anti-fascist element in the country to be a domestic terrorist group. Is actually said that the Blue Act Now Blue fundraising activities by the Democratic Party ought to be designated as a terrorist financing group, that they're financing terrorism, and they ought to be hunted down and arrested and put in cuffs and perp walked, as he put it, into prison. All of the people that are supporting the fundraising of the Democratic Party. And on the other hand, you have people in the moderate community and liberal and progressive community, all with our hair on fire over the fact that they believe that Donald Trump is in the process of trying to establish an authoritarian government, indeed a fascist government. They're withholding effective loyalty and support from virtually any of the policies that President Trump is attempting to put into effect. You're getting completely unanimous votes on the part of the people in the House and in the Senate against his policies. And they're squeaking through with like 3 or 4 votes in the majority. And you see people, you know, with ICE being deployed all throughout the country now, and heavily armed and masked, you know, breaking people's windows in, you know, with their gun butts and dragging them out of their cars and checking to see if they're actually legitimate citizens. And so that people are asking in the country, you know, why should we pay special attention to this UFO issue that people have been hearing about for years? And in light of what's going on the planet, not only is there all of the daily tragedy of the bombings in Gaza and the bombings in the Ukraine, in the massive slaughter of innocents and tens of thousands of children, and the drifting toward potential thermonuclear war with China or with Russia, either one. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have now updated the doomsday clock to the point where it is now just like 3 minutes before midnight. Even during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962, it was only 5 minutes to midnight. But they've now upped the clock in light of the tensions that are going on. The United States, under both the Clinton administration, Democratic, and under the W. Bush administration, which, as we know, is the Dick Cheney administration. That they were, welcoming into and organizing into NATO all the different republics that had been released in 1991 when Gorbachev released all the republics from the Soviet Union, and had been promised by James Baker, the Secretary of State, and George Bush Sr., that none of those countries would be recruited into NATO. And yet, when Cheney came in, he just went right after them and started recruiting, not only recruiting them into NATO, but putting United States nuclear missiles into all of those countries, all along the western boundary of Russia. And then they were moving on the Ukraine. There was no doubt about that. They were attempting to oust the leadership in the Ukraine. And they were actually going to even put nuclear missiles into the Ukraine, including Crimea. And the people who are studying about these things at the university level now understand what's going on. Crimea is the section of the Ukraine that overlooks the only warm water port in all of Russia, where all of their nuclear submarines and naval forces go in and out in the winter. And yet the United States was moving on that territory to surround it with nuclear missiles. And Putin began talking about deploying field artillery nuclear weapons at that point. This is what's caused the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists to up the doomsday clock to just 3 minutes before total thermonuclear annihilation of our entire species. And of course, we're all familiar with the issue of global climate change. We see the kind of things happening and so again, it raises the question of, with all of these kind of things going on in the world, why should we become suddenly interested in this whole UFO issue? And that's what we're here to talk about here today. The way that this is unfolded, as some of you know, and that's why you're here today, is that back in December of 2017, there appeared on the front page of the New York Times this major story about the fact that our United States Pentagon was in fact, while they were publicly denying that there was any evidence whatsoever that UFOs were real, that they were asserting that all the claims about seeing a UFO were, searchlights shining off the bottom of clouds, or they were flocks of birds that had been misidentified as UFOs, or even swamp gas being misidentified as UFOs. But at the same time, the New York Times revealed that the Pentagon actually had an above top secret program inside the Pentagon operating that was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. And then a fellow by the name of Luis Elizondo was the commander of this unit, and that they were in fact investigating UFOs, in that they were real. And so this was the event that kind of triggered this kind of more recent spate of information and interest in the UFO phenomenon. And it was followed on by Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, who was the Assistant Deputy Secretary of Defense in charge of intelligence for the entire Defense Department of the United States, not only under President Clinton in the Democratic administration, but also under W. Bush in the Republican administration. And he was telling the world on 60 Minutes that UFOs are real, and that they are in fact being occupied and piloted and navigated by non-human beings. And then it was followed by the testimony of David Grush. David Grush was a colonel in the United States Air Force who was a member of the Geospatial Intelligence Center, which most people didn't even know existed, actually, and that he was part of the National Reconnaissance Office, and he was a member of this ultra-secret UAP task force that was functioning inside the Pentagon. And he came forward and testified in Congress to the House Oversight Committee under oath that our United States government was in possession of an actual non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft. And that we were in possession of the bodies that had been recovered, that had been DNA tested and proven to be non-human. And he asserted this to the United States Congress under oath and told the Congress that our Pentagon and intelligence agencies, along with a number of private aerospace corporations, were secretly involved in not only a secret UFO crash recovery program of going all around the world trying to find any instance where a UFO may have crashed to recover it, but that they were actively engaged in pulling them down. They were actually shooting down UFOs so they could get their hands on a fully functional craft, and that they were engaged in a program of reverse engineering the technology of the UFO craft, and that they were attempting to build a brand new weapons system, a whole new generation of weapons predicated upon the technology of the UFOs. They were trying to discover their propulsion system. They were realizing that they were, and all this testimony was coming into Congress, that they were monitoring the UFOs on radar. People kept saying, well, hey, if the UFOs are all around, how come we're not picking them up on radar? Well, we were picking them up on radar. And they were actually videoing them. They have the gun camera videos of the UFOs that were being taken by the F-18 Super Hornets, okay? And that they had hundreds of hours of video of these craft all over the place, that they'd actually developed an ultra-secret radar system that was able to detect the UFOs even when they weren't visible, that they were still cloaked and they were able to find these UFOs. These UFOs were traveling from 80,000 feet, that is technically in outer space, down to the surface of the ocean in 0.7 of 1 second. Okay, and stopped generating 6,000 Gs force that would absolutely tear asunder any equipment that we have ever devised. And then they would plunge into the ocean, making no splash, and then travel at over 200 miles an hour underwater. They were being monitored by our United States submarines in sonar, okay? And that this testimony is coming in now to the United States Congress. And they're talking all about the fact that these craft have been observed surveilling all kinds of our major nuclear weapons facilities. They have overflown U.S. Minuteman nuclear missile bases and shut off every single one of the nuclear missiles. They have actually overflown a nuclear U.S. Nuclear aircraft carrier battle group and shut it off entirely. Shut off all the propulsion, shut off all the electricity, shut off all the communications. And that's the entire battle group, including the submarines that were accompanying them and the destroyers. This they've done, okay? And this information is all being communicated now. There's over 40 witnesses that have come in under oath, pursuant to depositions in the Senate Intelligence Committee, have conveyed this information to the members of the United States Senate. And it turns out that the day after the testimony of Colonel David Grush confirming the reality of all this, the United States Senate actually passed a 64-page bill in which they insisted that the President of the United States appoint a 9-person board and that they ordered all 6 of our United States military services, all 18 of our United States intelligence agencies, and all 32 of our United States Defense Department agencies that are understood to possess information about the UFOs and what we've been doing about them, to convey all of this information to the National Security Archives under security and make it available to the members of Congress. And very importantly, they had in the bill, the United States Senate passed the 64-page bill ordering that group of people, once the president appointed them, to prepare a UFO controlled disclosure campaign plan that was to be implemented by the president to reveal to the public the information. And they were to reveal all of the information that was 20 years old or more, so that virtually anything earlier than the year 2000 would have to be publicly revealed immediately. And anything that was to be postponed in the public revelation would have to be explained by the president, and only the president would be able to designate any such thing. But that in any event, all of the information had to be revealed within the 7-year period of that panel's life. Okay? So this is an extraordinarily important piece of information because on September 30th, just 17 days from now, those agencies are compelled by Congress to turn over all that information to the National Archives. Okay? Even though the House did not approve the Senate portion demanding that the panel be put together, the fact of the matter is we're still engaged in the effort to try to get that panel put together so that it can craft a UFO controlled disclosure campaign plan and provide it to the president. So in all of that having gone on, the Catholic Church has now issued an official statement in which they have stated that in light of all of the newly discovered exoplanets, because of the now spaceborne observatories, such as the Hubble, the Max Planck telescope, and now more recently the James Webb telescope, that in light of the discovery of all of these new exoplanets, it has now become clear, Roman Catholic Church, Vatican official statement, it has now become clear that much sooner than had been previously anticipated, life elsewhere in the universe is going to be discovered. And therefore, the moment has arrived to begin the all-important discussion of the profound philosophical and theological questions that are posed to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. Now, because of my previous experience of having been general counsel for the United States Jesuit Headquarters, National Office of Social Ministry in Washington, D.C., I reached out immediately and contacted Father Jose Gabriel Funes, who is the one who was directed to issue this official statement on behalf of the Vatican. And I went and met with Father Funes, and he said to me right within the first 2 minutes of our conversation, he said, "Look, Danny," he said, "we're not talking here about the discovery of some single cell life form beneath some frozen sea on some distant moon, orbiting some planet around some distant star in another galaxy. We're talking about another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human species right here in our Milky Way galaxy." Now that's from the official announcement from the Vatican, okay? And so what I'm saying is that we're standing now waiting in just within basically 2 weeks from having all of this information turned over to the United States National Archives made available to the Congress. Unless, of course, the military services and the intelligence agencies, in the Defense Department agencies, refuse to do it, even though they've been ordered by the United States Congress, both the Senate and the House, signed into law by President Biden, ordering them to turn this over, okay? And if they defy the Congress in doing that, it's going to be continuing to reveal to us as an American public that the national security state, this deep state in the government, is defying Congress itself. And that this is, the question is, are we ready for this? Are we ready for this information to be revealed to us? Are we prepared to come to grips with this? And so what I want to do today is I want to share with you some of the details of what the information is that is being revealed to the Senate Intelligence Committee behind closed doors, so that you'll understand the gravity of the situation that we have here. All right, and we've come here to the campus at Yale University to try to share this information, which will be made available, the videoing of it, to the faculty and to the rest of the students who are not here today, because this information is extremely important for you to understand. Okay, now let's just go down through some of this detail again. Number one, it has now been absolutely confirmed by persons with firsthand, immediate personal knowledge that our government is in possession of up to 9 non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft, and that they're in possession of upwards of 19 bodies of non-human beings who are piloting or occupying these craft. All right? Now, you would think that that would be the big one. You know, as soon as that's announced, you know, the whole world would have to change. Everybody would have to go, holy mackerel, you know, this is the stuff that starts science fiction movies, you know, about the future. Well, we're in the future. That's the point, that this has been told now to Congress. And that the reality is that there are at least 5 different species of these non-human extraterrestrial beings that are in existence. That there are the small gray beings, approximately 3.5 feet tall. You know, any 5th grader can draw you one, you know, with a large head and the big black almond eyes that stretch around to the sides, you know, the long skinny arms, you know, with 3 fingers, you know, a trunk, body, head, nose, you know, feet, the whole 9 yards, right? And then there are the tall whites that are like 6 feet tall, that look similar with the big round heads and the big dark eyes, etc. And then there is a 3rd group, which they call the reptilians. That reptiles get a bad rap, you know, I mean, here on our planet, because people are kind of freaked out by them, kind of these cold-blooded little lizardy guys, you know, but, you know, except for the Progressive insurance kid, the little guy. Yeah, but the bottom line is, you know, these are humanoid beings that are 6 feet tall, but just like all of us, during the gestation period of each and every one of us, you know, going on right here presently, there's a phase that each one of us goes through where we have scales, we have gills, we have a long tail. The evolution of our human species, Homo sapiens, you know, up through the evolutionary process, came through this entire reptilian phase of dinosaurs and reptiles. That this is how life evolved on our planet. That it's clear that there's another planet in our galaxy where the process of biological evolution got to the stage of the reptilian stage, in fact, and it just horizontaled out to the point where these were the ones that evolved into a fully highly intelligent, sentient, now highly technologically developed species who are capable of this high technology. And then there are the group they call the mantis people. The mantis people are like 7 feet tall, extraordinarily skinny. They look like a praying mantis. It's what people think of when they see them. Extremely skinny, leaning in all the time. And virtually every time they've been witnessed, they are kind of in charge of any of the other ETs. And even, we'll get to it, in charge of human military people that they're seen in the presence of. Okay? Because the other important fact is that not only do these species exist in the galaxy, they're coming here. This is, I think, sort of a key point because, as you know, DeGrasse, whatever his name is constantly saying, oh, who cares whether there's life elsewhere in the universe because they certainly can't get here, because they're like millions of miles away. And as we all know, no material thing can accelerate beyond the speed of light. And so therefore they'll never be able to get here because they're just too far away. And we'll never be able to get there. So, all of this conversation about, whether there's life or not, it doesn't really make much difference to us. Well, it turns out that's not true. Because it turns out that they have a means by which they get here. Okay? And they are here. And the fact is that it's known by our United States military and by our intelligence agencies that they're coming and going. It's known that they have bases here on our planet. There is a base right down off Baja, down here, off a thing called Guadalupe Island. It's a hugely deep area of the ocean. There's a huge mountain range beneath the surface of the sea on the ocean floor, and there are deep valleys and things in that mountain range, and there's a base in there. And in fact, they deployed the USS Nimitz nuclear aircraft carrier battle group and monitored this, and they've got videos of over 100 different UFOs, coming and going into that one spot in the ocean. Okay, they know the exact longitude and latitude of it, and they've monitored it. Okay, and they know that there are other bases around, high in the mountains of completely non-populated mountain ranges where the beings are here. And so they have bases here. That doesn't mean that they started here. It means that they've come here and they've established these bases. And this is known. And in fact, it's been known since 1947. It was actually discovered in 1945, but Colonel Corso, who encountered one of them, didn't report it. Colonel Philip Corso was the captain at the time. He was at Yucca Flats, where they were getting ready to detonate, we were getting ready to detonate the first atomic bomb at Alamogordo. And they were actually building the facility up and putting all kinds of super radar up around to protect the whole area. And Captain Corso was one of the range officers. And he actually got ready to take a lunch break, and he gets one of the Jeeps and he drives out away from the site up into the hills, and he parks, and here's a UFO on the ground, sitting right there by the mouth of this cave, and he gets out of the Jeep and goes over, and the being, one of these tall grays or tall whites gets out of the vehicle, actually comes out of this mouth of the cave, and walks up to him and telepathically communicates to him that, look at, our ship has run into some kind of interference here, which appears to have been the heavy radar coverage, and that we need you to do whatever you can do to turn this off for just a minute so we can leave. And Colonel Corso reflected upon it, and he ended up agreeing to do it. So the question you asked me is, well, how do you know that? You know, I know that because I personally saw, the little black and white 8mm home movie that then Colonel Corso made to be left after he died to show to his grandchildren. You know, now that's not something that someone makes up. You know, one doesn't just fake this kind of information to be left to your grandchildren. You know, so I got to see that. You know, so that I became convinced that that was true. And Colonel Corso went on from being a captain at that time to being the colonel that was in charge of the foreign technology development at the United States Pentagon. And he has left now a memo stating that following the July 1947 crash of a UFO, actually possibly 2 UFOs, at Roswell, New Mexico, that he was actually put in possession of the technology that was recovered from the craft. And that this has given us the silicon chip that's at the base of the development of all the computer technology. Now, all the way leading on up to AI that we're now experiencing. This was the source of the silicon chip came from the crash at Roswell, along with the fiber optics technology, along with the night vision equipment that you see the guys all flipping down the little night vision stuff there. That all came from the Roswell crash, according to Colonel Corso, who was, you know, nothing less than the person in charge in the United States Pentagon on foreign technology development. Okay, this has been known since 1947. And additionally, we now know that what happened is after the recovery of that the crafts at Roswell in 1947, we know that the bodies were taken to Wright Field eventually. You know, and some of the crash debris were taken to Wright Field. Now, how do we know this? Okay, we know this because there's this a really famous photo, if you've ever seen it, that what happened is Colonel or General Roger Ramey, who was the commander of the regional U.S. Army Air Corps at the time, in July of 1947. This was before the United States Air Force had actually been established as a separate unit. He actually immediately flew to the site in Roswell that night, and he contacted the editor of the local Roswell, New Mexico newspaper and ordered them to send a photographer over to the base at the 509th the bomber group, where it was the only place on the planet that had atomic weapons. It was the base from which the Enola Gay had been launched. It dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and August 8th of 1945. This was the base where the nuclear weapons were. That's where these craft were when they crashed. Okay? And what happened is Roger Ramey came in, contacted the editor, ordered him to send a photographer out, because what he did is he faked took out some weather balloon debris and scattered it on the floor of the hangar, and then knelt down, you know, next to it in the famous picture where he all knelt down like this, showing the debris. And he's got in his hand a telegram. And when I saw that photograph the very first time, I said, you know, someday we're going to have the technology pursuant to which we might read that telegram. And in fact, we did. When I was representing Dr. John Mack at Harvard University, who had written the book about abductions, I was asked to go and deliver an update on the case that we were dealing with the Harvard faculty at the International UFO Congress out in Laughlin, Nevada. And I got done with making the presentation, and a guy comes up out of the audience. And he says to me, Mr. Sheehan, he said, look, I think I found the photographer who actually took the photos back in July of 1947 at Roswell. And I said, shit. I said, if that's true, let's see if that's the guy, because he might still have the negatives, because this is kind of an historic event, and he may well have kept them. If he did, we can get them and have them digitized and blown up, which is exactly what we did, because it was the guy, and he did find him. And he went and got the negatives. We had them digitized. We had them blown up. And in fact, you could read them. You could, and it said, take the disc to right field and bring the bodies of the victims. And that's what it says. Okay? Now that's not something somebody's going to fake, just to try to hoodwink us. That's stuff that I've been directly, personally involved in. So I know that is true. And what happened is later on that month, in July of 1947, President Truman brought together a group of guys from different parts of the government and from private corporations and financing circles, and set up a private group to take control of this, and never told Congress about it. It was such a deep secret that they'd recovered the technology from this craft, that they wanted to set up a method of back engineering it and investigating it to potentially develop weapons with it, okay, during this Cold War that was already underway. All right, and so that was President Harry Truman that did that. And they set up this group, and this group, codenamed Majestic, MJ-12, or whatever it ended up actually being designated as, took control of this entire program. Didn't tell Congress about it, didn't tell the rest of the Pentagon about it, didn't tell the world about it, didn't tell the American people about it, and so they kept it secret. In that they've been running the policies as part of a deep state since 1947. All right? So these are some of the things that, as I pointed out, that we know that they were engaged in an effort to reverse engineer this technology. It was based largely at Wright Field. Later it became Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the biggest Air Force base in the country, out in the 10th Congressional District in Ohio. And that they've been engaged in a program of attempting to capture other UFOs. That they've been trying to figure out where they're going to come and where they're going to arrive. In that they've developed some sort of an electric pulse weapon that can knock out their navigation system and capture them, which they've been doing. Okay, and that one of the pieces of technology, in addition to the silicon chip and the night vision, is they found a helmet in the wreckage, which became extraordinarily important, because what they discovered in doing the back engineering, that this helmet was used to pilot the UFO craft. And it's done telepathically. That the pilot would wear this helmet and would telepathically communicate with the craft, because as it turns out, the craft is semi-sentient. That what they have is, in the wiring of the craft, in addition to the fiber optics in the craft, they have they've taken stem cells. They know of the stem cell technology, and they've taken stem cells and they've generated brain tissue, synapses and dendrites, physical dendrites into the craft, and so that they can communicate telepathically with the craft, and so that our people have been trying to figure out how to do that, so that they can telepathically run the fighter jets, right? And so, but what they discovered is that the state of consciousness that one has to be in order to have that kind of capacity to telepathically communicate and to do it in an aggressive enough way to have it be effective. That the problem is, if you put the helmet on any of our fighter pilots, who are a very special kind of breed of people that are cranked up to be kind of super focused and highly energized, etc., that doesn't mean that they are of high consciousness. And the fact is, it would start frying their brain. And this happened any number of times. They fried out the brains of some of our top fighter pilots, trying to train them to use this equipment. And so they realized that they needed people that were psychic to do this. And so they began an exploration of trying to find psychic people that they could recruit to participate in learning how to navigate these UFOs. The people that were the most capable of being psychic enough to do that were children. And that they began a program searching for children that had psychic abilities. And they called it the GATE program. And they began initially by focusing upon military personnel because they were on the base and the kids were on base going to schools. So they started doing surveys among the kids to find those that were psychic. And then they started doing it in other schools for the GATE program. And that they would tell their parents that, oh, you have this really gifted child. You know, we want to bring the child to a special school and we'll give them full fellowships to the school so it'll be completely free. And you'll get paid as parents for having your child come to this school. And they began working with these children, trying to train them into being able to pilot these craft with this helmet. The problem is that they also discovered that the more amped up the kids were, the more psychic they could be. And so they began pumping them full of amphetamines. And then in addition to that, they discovered that if the child was in a state of terror, the fight or flight mechanism, that to the point where they would actually leave their body to avoid the terror, that they were even more psychic. And so they began doing that to these kids. And they became so frightened about what the lengths were to which they were going to try to figure out how to pilot these craft, that they've begun to deploy this program of keeping completely secret what they're doing. And so that they've developed, and it's now shown, we've got the documents showing it, that Richard Dolan, who published the 2-volume work called UFOs in the National Security State, through the Freedom of Information Act, has extracted some of the files that show the program that they had going to intimidate citizens, to shut them up about any of this stuff, to shut them up about seeing a UFO, and that they set forth to destroy the professional careers of people or destroy their family life, to get them branded as crazy, mentally ill, if they tried to report a UFO sighting. Because they became so desperate about trying to conceal what it is, the lengths to which they were going in this program, that it justified in their own mind actually deploying lethal force against people to keep them from revealing the existence of this program. They extrapolated from the fact that they were allowed to use lethal force to protect certain physical facilities, like nuclear weapons facilities. It says right on, you get near one of those places, they got the big signs out saying, beware, lethal force authorized to be used here. So what they did is they just extrapolated, say, well, look, if we're allowed to use lethal force to protect the facility where these craft are, we can certainly deploy lethal force even off base. And therefore, we'll direct the lethal force against people who are trying to invade the secret, like as if they're the Rosenbergs trying to steal our nuclear secrets, right? And so that's what they have done. And very importantly, they realize that the UFO people have some kind of technology that is capable of amping up their psychic capacities. They call it psionics, psionic assist, they call it. That there's some kind of technology that they've been trying to figure out of how the ET people do it. because, as it turns out, the way that their craft actually are transported from their star system to here is done that way, is done psychically. That what they do is they have the capacity that those of you who are familiar with it, most of you are, the so-called double slit experiment, where they project the photon in a direction toward a wall with two different slits in it, and the determination as to which of the slits it'll go through is completely random until you direct human intention to it. And once you observe it through human intention, it will what they call collapse the wave function of because, and this is where this really goes to here. The reality is that they're encountering now and engaging the UFO beings in the craft is they realize that all of reality is in fact the moment-to-moment, microsecond-to-microsecond collapse of the wave function of a vibrational frequency in which every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe, in fact, is made up of subcomponent elements. This you know, is that every one of the elements that we know of on the periodic table is decaying, but pursuant to its rate of atomic breakdown, right? Every single one of the elements has an attached, rate of atomic breakdown. And what it's doing is it's disintegrating into its constituent lower elements. And even those lower elements, then they also disintegrate. And what they've discovered is that they disintegrate down into ultimately each one of the elements, the distinctive elements, down into a particular atom that's got a certain number of neutrons and protons and a certain number of electrons. And that's what generates a one atom of that particular material thing. But what they've discovered is that through the cyclotron, they can collide two of these atoms together and they'll break up further. It'll break into electrons and neutrons and protons. And they've discovered that with the CERN particle collider, they can collide those together and they will break up. So even the photon or even a neutron or a proton or an electron can be broken down into smaller and smaller units of matter, such as leptons and kleptons and muons. There's a whole descending number of these things to the point where they get down to the smallest one, and when they collide two of these together, they disappear. But the point is that they lose all material manifestation, but they remain as an inchoate quantum field. And that inchoate quantum field in the next trillionth of a microsecond will in fact flash back into material manifestation, either as a wave of energy or a particle of mass. And then it'll blink right back out again, back into a simply inchoate quantum field of a non-material nature. But then it will flash back in the next tenth of a billionth of a microsecond into either a wave of energy or a particle of mass. And they've observed this, but it will do this at a completely random rate, so that you can never predict whether the next iteration of the material manifestation of that inchoate quantum field is going to be a wave of energy or a particle of mass, unless and until you direct human intention, just exactly like the double slit experiment. And if you direct human intention to an inchoate quantum field, willing it to manifest itself in the next trillionth of a microsecond as a particle of mass rather than a wave of energy, it will in fact do so to a statistically significant degree. Okay? This is one of the most profoundly important secrets in all of science, because it completely puts the lie to the Newtonian Cartesian strictly materialist worldview. This suggests that there's a world going on in the material plane that's completely independent from human consciousness. or intention. This is extraordinarily important because what they've discovered is that the beings who are from you got to remember, our star is only 4.5 billion years old. Our planet is about 3.7 billion years old. They understand that our universe is 13.8 billion years old, which means that there are other star systems, other galaxies, that are as much as 10 billion years older than ours, which means that there are other star systems that can be 10 billion years older than ours, and planets that are 10 billion years older than ours, which means that there could be species that are 10 billion years older than we are, which means that they have been exploring these exact same aspects of reality. And what they've discovered is that there is this phenomenon going on, that the way that material reality manifests itself is that in any given 1/10 trillionth of a microsecond, the next material iteration of the universe takes place. Just exactly like you know that our bodies are all replaced within a certain period of time. Every single cell in our body is replaced, over a period of time, so that the body that you have now is different than the body you had like a few years ago. Okay, well, the same thing happens with reality. That every single microsecond, reality remanifests itself. But it happens at such a rapid rate of 1/10 trillionth of a second that you don't notice it. But what they've discovered is that these beings appear to have been able to penetrate through consciousness into the very fabric of material reality. And that they can, by dint of their will, they can cause an inchoate quantum field to manifest not only as either a wave of energy or a particle of mass, but they can do so in a manner that can actually affect material reality. And so what they can do is they can actually project a craft from their star system. They can will it into material manifestation in our star system. And so that it isn't a matter of them traveling at multiple millions or even billions of miles a second in some sort of linear fashion. What they do is they jump from one material manifestation in a distant star system to another one, like that, through the force of will, through the force of consciousness, through the collapse of the wave function, because in the almost infinite number of alternative next microseconds of reality, almost everything exists in potential. And so what they can do is sort through all the different potential next iterations of reality and bring it into being, because they've got some sort of technology that is able to super amp up the capacity of their psyche. Now, you can imagine the terror that this strikes into the heart of our national security state, because they are capable of doing things that are so far beyond anything that we can even begin to comprehend. And so that our people are sort of like deer in the headlights in the face of this technology with these beings. It reminds me very much of, two very dear friends of mine, Robert McIntosh and Joe Zinn. We were sitting back in 1970, in New York City. I was at the big Wall Street law firm there, and Joe Zinn was in IBM. He was a big computer specialist in IBM. And Miney Mac was another one of my Harvard College and Harvard Law School friends. And we were all sitting around one Sunday afternoon, and Joe Zinn was saying, this stuff with all the computers that is going on right now. He said, in another 100 years, they're going to be able to do things with computers that you can't even conceive of right now. And Mighty Mac said, like what? Okay, so I mean, this is where we are with these beings. I mean, that when you begin to try to step linearly from one step to another to try to figure out, okay, how is what we know compared to what they know? And like, you can't even begin to get close to it. And so they don't know what to do about it. The problem is that when you have a UFO plasma-like craft appearing over the front gate at the Malmstrom United States missile site up in Montana in 1967, and this big vehicle appears right over the front gates and comes up over the top of the nuclear missile site, the Minuteman nuclear missile site. It's got 10 completely independently wired nuclear missiles that are attached to it. Okay, and Robert Salas, Captain Robert Salas, is down in the well. He's down, 60 feet below the ground with the keys. Yeah, him and the major that would turn the keys to light these 10 nuclear missiles up to destroy the world. He's down there, and all of a sudden he gets a call from the security people above, and they say, Captain Salas, there's this strange vehicle, some kind of aircraft vehicle that's coming in over the base here. And Salas says, well, he says, you're armed, aren't you? And the guy says, well, yeah, we've got a little like M16 or something. He said, well, then secure the perimeter. He says to him, well, the vehicle keeps on coming and comes up over the base. And so a few minutes later, this guy's calling down, again, frantic, Captain Salas, it's up over the base right now. I've got injured personnel here. My guys got so terrified by this, they tried to climb out over the razor wire from inside the base to get out of here. And so all of a sudden, he turns to go wake up the major who's taking a break, and all 10 of the nuclear missiles all go offline, one right after another. Completely helpless. Okay? And then flies away, and then shortly later they all start coming back online. And when they call NORAD, to report this having happened, the colonel that was in charge of 4 of these different bases, Colonel Arnoldson, when he calls NORAD and they say, are you trying to report a UFO sighting? And he said, yes, I am. Yes, I am. He said it was the most important moment of his whole life. He said, yes, I am. And the NORAD people said, well, that's interesting because it turns out that the missile site to your east and the other one to your west have had the exact same thing just happen. Okay? And when they reported that up the line to everyone, not a single person came to interview them about what had happened. And so they send in a team to try to find out what happened with the wiring, and the thing is completely functional. Not a single thing was wrong with the whole system. And they couldn't explain it at all. And this has happened repeatedly at nuclear sites. And it's happened in Russia. At the end of the Cold War, we got at some of their people, and they admitted that the same thing had happened with their missiles. Okay? So what I'm saying is that this reality is going on, and that there is this ongoing program with the national security state still denying it, officially denying that any of this is going on. Like, hello, what's wrong with you that you think UFOs are real? And it's a huge propaganda campaign to the point where any one of you that leaves here today and walks up to just one of your next friends and say, oh, by the way, on Sunday afternoon, I was over at Yale and we heard this interesting thing all about UFOs. And the odds are 50-50 that they're all going to go, yeah, right, excuse me, I've got something else I've got to do. And because of the effectiveness of the program that was undertaken by the United States intelligence agencies to brainwash everybody into believing that this isn't true. Okay? Now what this does is it raises a really profound question about the legitimacy of the national security state that we have, that is engaging in deploying against our own citizens tactics that were developed and authorized to be used against foreign adversaries. And that they were allowed to blackmail them, they were allowed to murder them, they were allowed to overthrow their democratically elected governments. This has been going on since September of 1947, when they created the Central Intelligence Agency. And later in February of 1948, the National Security Council, it's just another executive agency, just issued an executive order authorizing the CIA to engage in covert operations against other governments. And it's been doing that now for 70 or 80, 78 years. And the fact is they've turned those same exact tactics back upon our people. And they've done it to the elected representatives. They've lied to the elected representatives. They blackmailed the elected representatives. They've threatened the elected representatives with blackmail or killing them to keep them in line. I know this to be true because I know that they did it to one of the United States senators, Durenberger, back the United States Republican senator from Minnesota, back in 1985, 87 actually, because we know what happened. And so what I'm saying is that the whole reason that the UFO things become such an important issue for us as citizens is that unless we're able to actually have control over our own government decision making, you're not going to be able to do anything about this. Yeah. So whenever I've been working on this thing for all this time, I started working on this back in 1976, right after President Carter got elected. When President Carter got elected in November of 1976, the first thing he did actually was he sent for the head of the Central Intelligence Agency to come down to Plains, Georgia, and brief him on the UFO issue, because he had seen a UFO. Not like some distant dancing star in the sky doing weird things, but I mean like treetop level, the length of a football field away, treetop level, when he was the governor of Georgia. He was at this Lions Club meeting, and the guys had gone out to have a smoke break, and they were staying out there, and here it was. It came right where they all saw it. So one of the first things he did is he sent to ask the head of the CIA to come and brief him on the UFO issue, now that he was elected president. Well, it turns out the head of the CIA in November of 1976 was George H.W. Bush, who had been appointed by Gerald Ford, who had just taken over being president because Richard Nixon resigned after the Watergate thing. Okay? And George H.W. Bush refused to give him the information, saying that as president of the United States, he had no need to know this information. Okay? This was in the possession of the national security state people. And he was like virtually a temporary employee, and he couldn't be trusted with the information. So what President Carter did is he contacted the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives, that was headed up by a Democrat, and asked him to task the Library of Congress's Congressional Research Service. This is the service that actually conducts research on behalf of different members of the Senate and House when they request it. And he contacted them and asked them to undertake an investigation, research, to find out what documentation we actually had inside our government acknowledging or confirming the reality of the UFO phenomenon. Okay? And that's how I got contacted. I was at Jesuit headquarters, as I mentioned earlier. I was general counsel at the United States Jesuit headquarters in their social ministry office, which did all of our public policy stuff. And so I got contacted by Dr. Marcia Smith, who was the head of the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service, and asked if I could get access to the Vatican archives to find out what was in the Vatican archives about UFOs, to make it available to the president. And I got permission to do that from the Jesuit provincials, and we did it. I went through that whole process. That's how I became involved. That's how I got to see the classified portions of Project Blue Book in the early spring of 1977. And I saw the photographs of a UFO crash retrieval operation being undertaken. It was in the classified portions of Project Blue Book that nobody was allowed to see in the public. Okay, and so there it was. And so I knew that it was there. And so I actually traced the symbols that were on the bottom of the dome of this craft. You could see in the photographs that it had crashed. There was snow on the ground where it happened. So it wasn't the Roswell crash, which happened in the middle of July of 1947. It was something else. They plowed this big gouge through the snow, and it was stuck in the side of this big embankment. And I could see these symbols along the bottom of the dome. And so I pulled out a yellow pad and opened it up to the inside cardboard and traced all the symbols that were on the bottom of the dome, and closed it back up again and left. I went back to Jesuit headquarters, and I showed it to Father Bill Davis, who was my Jesuit superior at the headquarters. And he reached in and slid open the drawer on his desk and took out this little 8.5 by 11 manila folder with one of those little clips on it, and he handed it to me. So I unclipped it and pulled out an 8.5 by 11 black and white photograph of a UFO, the Jesuit headquarters, in flight. And so I said to him, I said, "Where did you get this?" And he said, "I got it from my sister Dodie." And I said, "Well, where did Dodie get it?" He said, "Oh, she got it from Mike, her husband, who is the head of the air traffic controllers at the Seattle airport." And I said, "Well, where did Mike get it?" And she said, "Oh, he got it from his best friend, who's a commercial pilot, a cargo pilot that flies cargo all around the Northwest. He took this photograph right out the window of his airplane. And then when he went to the drugstore to get it developed, and when he got it back and he realized what he had, he said he didn't want to get in trouble. He didn't want to lose his pilot license by reporting it. So he took it and gave it to his best friend, who was the head of the air traffic controllers at the Seattle airport. And then Mike didn't want to get in trouble with it. So he brings it home and gives it to Dodie. And he says, "Here, give this to your brother. He's a priest." Whatever that means. And so the question is, what does that mean? Why is it? Why is it that it's assumed that all this information has something to do with what priests are about, what religion is about, which has to do with the entire understanding of our human consciousness, our entire sense of ourselves as a separate conscious entity, in the midst of the whole universe? What's going on here? How did we come into being? How does consciousness relate to the material realm? All of these are profound fundamental questions that have to do with religion, with theology, with consciousness. And so that what we're dealing with here is a moment in history where everything is getting ready to change. Everything is getting ready to change. That we're going to be coming to know for the very first time, to an absolute certainty, that we are not only not alone in the universe, but that there are other sentient, highly intelligent, much more advanced beings who in fact are here, and who are interacting with us, and who clearly our intelligence community knows are here. And they must have established some kind of protocol. They must have reached out to them. They must be trying to communicate with them. They must be having some kind of an understanding that at least that they don't go fighting with each other, okay? And yet they're not telling us what it is. They're not sharing with us what the relationship is or what the information is that they're getting. So what I'm saying is that while what's happening, with the assassination of this fellow 2 days ago, with all the stuff going on in Gaza, all the stuff going on in the Ukraine, all of which is extraordinarily important. The bottom line is that we have potential access to information about sources of power and energy that could completely prevent the global climate change from happening. That we can completely replace the entire petroleum industry on our planet and stop polluting our planet. We have kinds of energy. They calculated from them observing this UFO move from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean in 0.7 of 1 second, and then plunge under the ocean and travel at over 200 miles. They said that one move took more energy than all of the sum total of all the energy generated by all 103 of our private nuclear power plants in the country for a full year. And that energy is available to us and is being concealed, is being hidden by the national security state because they want to maintain petroleum. Because virtually all of, except for the nuclear submarines and nuclear aircraft carriers, all of the United States military runs on petroleum. All their jet fighters, all of their tanks, all of their vehicles, everything. And so that they're wedded at the hip with the petroleum industry. In fact, the military is deployed to protect the access to the oil, which is what we've just all gone through with the invasion and occupation of the Middle Eastern oil fields, by our United States military. So it's this entire symbiotic kind of relationship that they all have, and they're all attached to these things to the point of poisoning the planet by having all the vehicles run basically by petroleum, and all the electric energy being generated by petroleum, contaminating the air. And they've known for the last 50 years that they're poisoning the planet, and yet they still are just trapped in the loop. They're kind of like gerbils, on a wheel here, and they're just trapped. And so that what we've got to do is we have to have some kind of intervention here. There has to be a dramatic intervention to keep things from going the way that we can feel them all sliding right now, sliding toward nuclear war. Is there anybody here who doesn't hear it every day about beating up on China and insulting China and say, oh, the Chinese are harassing our ships, our battleships, which just happen to be in the South China Sea? Who do they think they are anyhow? Interfering with our battleships, off their coast. So that we've got to be able to intervene as citizens, as people who have access to democratic power in our country. This is not a common thing around the world here, but we happen to reside at the heart of this particular beast who's engaged in deploying, our United States military in 800 military bases outside of the United States, okay, for the purpose of securing and maintaining their continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials needed by our major corporations, because they believe that what's good for General Motors is good for the country. And this is their own language. This comes out of the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance document, prepared, by the Bush Senior administration, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney at the time, in response to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the voluntary dissolution of the Soviet Union by Gorbachev. And their response was, inside our Defense Department, well, this is a great opportunity. Here, everybody thinks that, well, we can cut the military budget down because for the last 75 years we've been spending, $700 to $800 billion every year defending ourselves against the Soviet Union. But now that they've dissolved, there's going to be great pressure put on us to cut down dramatically on the military budget. But what we should do, according to Dick Cheney and the Secretary of Defense, we ought to increase our military spending, because we got this golden opportunity now to become the sole dominant military power on the planet. We can, in fact, establish, quote, full spectrum dominance over the planet and all of its resources. And the purpose of this will be for us to be able to secure and maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials needed by our major American corporations. Okay? Unless you didn't know about the essay that was written by Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, in 1933, this is fascism. This is exactly what fascism is. It's the putting at the disposal of all of the instrumentalities of the state into the interests of the private corporations, which are in fact still owned privately. And the owners of the stock are all immunized against any personal liability for anything that the corporation does wrong. You know, I mean, this isn't rocket science, you know? This is a dangerous problem on our planet. And it's generated the antipode of the antithesis of the communism, you know, that's on the other end, that's setting up the same kind of national security state stuff that we're doing. So that you get this dialectic, you know, just like what's happening in the country here. Of, you know, the people on one side are calling all the other people fascists, and all the other people are calling all of the people on the other side socialists and communists, you know, and that's what's happening here. And so what I'm saying is that we have an opportunity here, if we can mobilize as the citizens of our country and demand that this information that is being sequestered by the national security state now, hiding and concealing new sources of energy, hiding and concealing all kinds of new technologies, hiding and concealing from us all the information that UFO people that may be 10 billion years advance of us know about, that we could have as a benefit to help our people, okay? And it's being concealed so that they can maintain a competitive advantage militarily over other people on our planet. This is a very serious situation that we're talking about here. So this is a subject that opens onto all of these extraordinarily important issues, including issues of philosophy, issues of theology, issues of you know, the most profound philosophical questions that our human family's been asking ourselves, you know, ever since we've you know, evolved the intellect. So this is a profoundly important set of information that I'm sharing with you, and what we're inviting you to do is to become part of Citizens for Disclosure. It's completely for free. You know, we have it set up at the New Paradigm Institute that you see. I don't know where we're at on this, but anyway, it's the New Paradigm Institute. You go on the internet, newparadigminstitute.org. And you'll see the part that enables you to sign up to become part of Citizens for Disclosure. This is a place where people are supposed to be thinking about how to apply your intelligence and gathering and processing of data and information to figure out how to solve problems and to seek and obtain opportunities for our whole species on our planet. Okay, gang? So that I'll give you the rest of your Saturday afternoon off. So I'm glad that I didn't cause you to miss church by having this really be on a Sunday. Okay? So look, thank you for coming. Yeah. Thank you. Great.